Today I'm going to be finishing the trees by flocking and basing them. So to begin the process of the flocking on the trees, the foliage is comprised of two elements. The first layer is clump foliage, which I made myself in a previous video to comprise the main volume of the tree leaves. And the second element is some woodland scenics, blended turf foliage, just sprinkled over in a light dusting to create a little bit finer detail, to blend the clump foliage together a little bit, and to create just a tiny variation of color. So I start applying the clump foliage by using hot glue. I tried super glue, PVA glue, tacky glue, which is just a little bit thicker PVA glue, and finally settled on is hot glue as the best method to attach the clump foliage, because of course it sets very quickly. It's thick enough to take hold in the clump foliage and is really easy to apply and doesn't create a mess. The only challenge you have to compete with is the little strings that it can leave behind, but as long as you don't have a problem picking those off as they appear, it's worth it. It's a lot easier than the other methods I tried. So I just go about applying hot glue to one branch at a time and then sticking on clumps of the clump foliage, which I tore off the larger sheets that I had made earlier. Yeah, so I just applied one layer to the top of each branch and then to the bottom, and it really started to build up quite quickly. Then the next step I did was to get a spray bottle, fill it with water, and then add some PVA glue to it. Mix it up real good, and then squirt the PVA glue solution onto the foliage to soak into the foliage. And then I did that to sprinkle the woodland scenics flocking on top, so it would hold onto the clump foliage. You have to be careful with the spray PVA glue because the water in it will reactivate the glue from what you used to in the clump foliage itself, and if I got it too wet, the glue would actually start to come apart, and some of the pieces of clump foliage would actually fall apart and fall off the tree, which was not at all what I was trying to do, obviously. So you can see a few of these pieces are falling off. The solution to this was just to go a little sparing with the sprayed on glue, just to create enough adhesion to catch some of the flocking, the loose flocking, to keep it in place while the PVA glue re-dried. And after the dusting of flocking was applied, it really blended the clump foliage together a little bit better, and then added a little bit more color variation to it, because in the flocking I used was blended turf, which has a little bit of yellow in it. It made it look like there's a few dried out leaves on the trees, which looked great. Another result of spraying the clump foliage with another layer of the watered down PVA glue was that once that soaked in and dried, it did reinforce the clump foliage and made it a little bit stiffer than it even had been before, which was great. So to create the bases of the trees, I decided to use DOS air drying clay, and two reasons. I had seen people use it in many other videos and just really wanted to give it a try, and secondly, I figured it would allow me to create narrower diameter bases so that I could put the trees closer together if I wanted to. I figured if I used MDF to create the base, I would need to bevel it, obviously, to make it blend into the table a bit better. And the top, where the bevel started, would have to be as wide as the root clump of the wires at the bottom of the tree. And then it would need to bevel down, creating another ½ inch radius of the base, creating a much wider base than I was wanting to do. So I figured if I used clay, it wouldn't need to be any wider than the root clump itself, which would save me a ½ inch or so. So I went and picked up some DOS air drying clay and just gave it a shot. My concern had been that maybe the clay would warp, because I had seen some of that happen on videos. But what I found was that as long as you mold it around the wires at the base of the tree, they hold it flat and it doesn't warp. As long as there's some structure inside the clay, it won't warp when it dries out. So I just go about applying some clay to the bottom to fill the void under the bottom root clump there, and then apply some over the top just to blend it together and create a nice beveled base down to the table. And then I just set it out to dry. I did this on top of some wax paper so that the clay wouldn't stick to the surface, because obviously I didn't want it to stick to anything. And then once you get it done, you can let it set for an hour or two, and the top portion of the base will start to dry out. And once that happens, then you can lean the tree over so that the bottom has the opportunity to dry out. And once the top starts drying, it won't deform once you lean it on its side. So this is really simple. It just took 30 seconds a piece, and I just made sure that the base wasn't any wider than it needed to be by trimming some of the wires first off, and then making sure the clay didn't extend past the ends of the wires unnecessarily. And this is an example of what the base looks like after it's finished. I just went ahead and based them like I do the rest of my Blood Angels army. I just add some PVA glue, put some texture on top of it, paint it out, dry brush it, and add some static grass. But of course you can base it however you want to match your tabletop or your army, or do whatever you'd like. So hopefully you've seen how easy it is to make your own trees. It's a worthwhile project. It can be really rewarding because I think they've turned out great. If you've gotten anything out of these, I appreciate you watching and hope that you like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one.